Hello, my name is Bridget Kinane. I am recording this video for our SEDN 658 Section 22 final about our case study from the IRI midterm. So to begin, just so you know, it is a first grade. The student I'm focusing on, her name is Brooke. She is a neighbor of mine. She was also my student in pre-K because I work in the neighborhood pre-K, UPK. So I know her family and I know her for years. So she's now in first grade, and her mom is actually the speech pathologist at my school. So I asked her if I could use her for this. It seemed like the most, made the most sense. So after school, a few days, I met with her, and this is the lesson I came up with for her. So the lesson title is Introducing the Five Senses. I find that that's a great topic to start with students because it's first of all, it's a topic that they really should know a lot about. And second of all, it's enticing to them because they have all these senses for the most part, but there's also people that do not, which is very intriguing to them. So my focus is for the students to learn about their five senses and begin to understand why they are so important. Throughout this lesson, I basically focused on their sense of sight. This would have been a unit plan where I would have focused on the sense of sight, which I have focused on the sense of sight first. Then I go to, hearing, tasting, and so on. The objective is the children are introduced to their five senses and focus on the sense of sight. The student will be able to discuss how to use their sense of sight. Some of the language demands where the students will be expected to utilize their skills and orally recall facts from the story as well as their memory in order to recall things that happened prior to the story. On their way to school, for example, the students will need to utilize these skills so that we can understand if they are understanding the lesson objective. Some of the key vocabulary, senses, sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste, seeing, eyes, eyesight, vision, blind, and braille. I'll get into the rest of that later. Some of the resources I used were My Five Senses by Aliki. Sorry, it's a big copy. I have a smaller one at school, but markers, paper, and then the space I would use would be the classroom space, and I'd be walking around around the classroom. And also in my classroom at school, I have the ability to walk outside directly from my classroom. If I was in a bigger school, I wouldn't be able to do that, but if I was using my own classroom right now, I would have the children go outside with me, and we could look around at different things we could see. There's a park outside and stuff like that. So it'd be more they'd be very intrigued, I feel, to do that. If it was a regular classroom, I would just use the space we have in the classroom in like a bigger school, a public school. Some of the materials would be markers, papers, and an I Spy book would be another one that I have that. So some of the prior academic learning and prerequisite skills, the students do not even realize that they are going to be building upon the skill of sight and recognizing how to use this skill. So majority, not all, but majority of my students, actually all of my students now, but majority of students are able to see and use their sense of sight. They have eyes and so on. But there are students that are not able to see. So this is where you could introduce, blindness, being blind. What does that mean? And Braille would be another thing to show them how they communicate and are able to read different things using Braille. I thought that would be a nice touch to add, just to make children aware of what goes on, because it's not everyone is the same. One common misconception, as I said, is that all people have the skill of the sense of sight. Introducing that some people are blind and what that means is something that needs to be addressed during this lesson. I think it's very important for them to do this. So the actual lesson, I would pique the interest, the teacher will pique the children's interest by going around the classroom and asking the children what is something that they see. The teacher will activate and build on prior knowledge by discussing how we use these skills daily and show them the purpose of them, as well as making sure they're understanding the importance of this lesson. The students will be, I would ask 5 students to come up and tell us different things that they are seeing around the room using their sense of sight, just to get a gauge on how they're doing. Then this is when I would read My 5 Senses by Aliki. The teacher will tell the students about why it is important to use their skills and ask the students examples and reasons why they need to use our sense of sight, if we have it. This is when we could also have students ask questions about blindness and how people communicate who are blind and so on. They would be sitting in their assigned seats listening to the teacher as the teacher reads the story. They will give different examples of why and how they use their sense of sight. And this is when, like I said, they may be able to ask questions about being any blindness. Then the teacher will then transition to telling the students that to each tell her something they are using their sight to see in the classroom without repeating what another student says. So if a student says using chalk or a dry erase marker, for example, we would want the following students not to be able to say whatever those students said. So if the first 2 students were chalk and eraser, the third student could not say chalk or eraser, and so on. It would build off of that. So, as it dwindles down to the last couple of children, they'll be able to tell you different things, but it might get a little harder for them versus the obvious chalk, blackboard, and so on. Okay. Each student will explain to the teacher something they are using their sense of sight to see from their seat. This is when the teacher will transition into telling students to stand up. She will assign the students to an area in the classroom, and those students will create a list of 20 things that they find in their small groups of about 4 or 5 children within those assigned areas of the classroom. So I would be sure to mix students with certain IEPs and English language learners with children that do not have these issues or problems that are holding them up. Not problems, but issues, I guess you could say. There will be 1 scribe for the student group. So there will be about 4 groups in the classroom, 1 in hopefully each corner of the classroom. That would make it the best way to do it, I think. And then there would be 1 scribe for the students and they will write down a list while the students themselves are checking out their classroom and helping the scribe to write down the 20 things that they're using their sight to see. This is when the teacher will be walking around and checking on each group to see if there's any students that are struggling with this task. If so, the teacher will be able to bring those students together, maybe in the middle of the classroom, so she'll still be able to, or she will be able to, make sure everything's going smoothly in the other small groups. Bring those students to the middle of the classroom and play a mini game of I Spy in the center of the room. This is while the other ones are finishing their task of the 20 things. So the students, after this, the teacher will have the students come back to their seats. Each group will come up to the front of the room and read out their list of 20 things that they have seen in the area of the classroom to their classmates. Once the list is read orally, the teacher will have the classmates explain to me that the group did the assignment correctly or not. So if group 1 goes up, then group 2, 3, and 4 will be the ones to explain why or why not the students in group 1 did the correct thing. If there's not much participation, the teacher will prompt and ask, did group 1 use their sense of sight correctly? And if so, tell me why. If not, tell me why. And so on until she got some conversation and discussion going. Each group, like I said, will come up, read their 10 to 20 things, their 20 things that were seen in the assigned area. 1 student from each group will go over to point out to the things that they saw as the others read out the list. This is so we know it is not made up. They didn't just say, oh, there's a marker over there when there might not be, or a pencil sharpener, and so on. The group classmates, like I said, will then discuss if the assignment was done correctly and if the group understood what the sense of sight is. This is when the teacher would assign they would have to write down as many different things that they are seeing both around the school and around their home for homework that night. So the extension of this would be, if time permits, the teacher can play the game of I Spy with all of the students. One student can go up and say, I spy with my little eye something white, for example. The students will then try and guess by raising their hand what it might be: chalk, the walls, a flag, and so on. Once they do that, the person who chooses correctly then goes up to the front of the room and begins this process again. And they can say, I spy with my little eye something blue, or whatever. And this will continue until the class time is over, or all the students get a chance to run through, or as many as you possibly could. For those who do not meet the learning standards, I would try and have them read the story, My Five Senses by Aliki, to me on a one-to-one level. And then I would try and explain again to them what was going on. So if no one has read My Five Senses, it's a story by Aliki. She's a great author. And just to hop through it, it's very, I don't know if you can see it all, but this is a sense of taste. I think it says, I can taste. I taste with my tongue. I can touch. I touch with my fingers. And so on. And then they go through and say how they use one sense doing certain things. They use four senses doing a different thing, like a different task, and so on. That you can use multiple senses at once. You can use only one sense. You can use one sense more than another, and so on. And then in the end, it just talks about being aware of your surroundings and how your senses help you to do that. So for my student Brooke, I would have her read the story to me, which is what I did. I did have her read the story to me. I found that she had some difficulty with the words senses. First of all, she struggled with that from the cover, from the get-go. And then she also struggled with, the word important was in there, which was a longer word that she had some trouble with. I also saw she also struggled with, in the beginning, it says, when I hear this, or when I smell this, when I do this. She always said with I do this, or when I hear, with I smell, and so on. And I was surprised by that she didn't correct it after a few times, because it says it very often in this book. So I did find that she struggled with that a bit. So yeah, I mean, she did great. She did really good at reading and everything. And in the IRI, she was on a level C, I believe. And so she did a really great job, but there was some words that I was shocked that she was struggling with. Wherever and whatever. Minute was one that she had to correct herself with. Aware was something she corrected herself with. I mean, she went back and self-corrected a lot, which is fine. But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, in the beginning, she was flying through the pages, and as it got a little more difficult, you could see that she was struggling a bit, like with whenever, wherever, and so on. Important, like I said. Okay, to continue. Students with special needs or IEPs. For the children with IEPs who may be struggling, I would link them up with classmates to help them to practice using their sense of sight as well as participate reading or their story out loud. My co-teacher or myself would be sure to check in on these groups, especially during the small group interactions. For the English language learners, I would also whoever was not checking on the IEPs would be checking on would be checking on the English language learners, either my co-teacher or myself. I would have other students model it first so that these students could see what is expected of them. And perhaps the children who are finished could help these students to practice their English speaking language by playing I Spy with them. So for example, if group 1 was finished first and group 2, 3, and 4 are still going around looking for their 20 items, if I would go over and make sure that either my co-teacher or I would be over talking to this group. And this is when I would say, how about we play a little game of I Spy? Depending on if students were struggling, but if the English language learner was struggling, and I was already pulling students from each group into the center, then that's what I would do. But if it was just, that student in that group, maybe I'd say, how about, if Joey's the one who's struggling, I would say, how about Chris? Chris, can you show me how to play I Spy? And then maybe Joey could pick up on what was going on, for example. And then the theory on learning and teaching. I find that students often learn well from just starting and practicing and doing the skills on their own. Like I said, instead of, of course I would try to explain I Spy to these students, but I find that if they were able to see it happening before them and pick up on how it works exactly, just like playing any other game first, I find students do that in many different ways, not just games, but that I find that helps a lot. So the students here, for the most part, are already using the skill of sight. This is just uncovering and putting presence on their skills and polishing it so that they can orally explain what they are doing. And that was really all of it. I would be taking anecdotal notes around the classroom as I was going around, and so would my co-teacher. And then, we could compare after the class is over, how did you find that Joey was doing? How did you find that Chris was doing? Did you write down that you thought that this person might be struggling or that person might be struggling? I agree, I disagree, and so on. So that is something that I think is a great tool to have, especially when you have a co-teacher who's able to do such a thing. I have a teacher's assistant now, but I know friends of mine that have them and a co-teacher, and they compare all the time, and I think that's a great tool to use to make sure and to grow your students' abilities in the best way possible. So this is the final for now. As I said, afterwards I would have a T list basically that said my 20 items in each group, and those students one scribe would write down all the items they found, and then they would, on a big sticky note, put it up on the board, and then go over it. And then, so you really need a classroom in order to explain or to show exactly what is meant here. But, if I was in this room, I would say, oh, I see a TV, I see a window, a fan, and so on. And those would be a door, some of the 20 things I would write down. Well, I hope you like this final, and I appreciate all the feedback, and have a great day. Thank you very much.